There are voices that entertain us, there are voices that become part of our memories, and then there are voices that become part of a people's identity. For generations of Kurds, the name Tahsin Taha has represented something more than music. His powerful voice, emotional interpretation, and connection to Kurdish culture turned him into one of the most remembered singers of his generation. But who was the man behind that voice? How did a young man from Amedi town become one of the defining voices of Kurdish music? And why, decades after his death, are people still listening to Tahsin Taha? Tahsin Muhammad Salim Taha was born in 1941 in the Amedi area of the Badinan region of Iraqi Kurdistan. Published sources disagree about his exact birth date, but they consistently place his birth in 1941. His father's work meant that the family lived in different towns across the region. Tahsin received his early education in places including Mangish, Duhok, and the surrounding Badinan area before continuing his education elsewhere. Music entered his life at an early age. He listened to influential Kurdish singers, including Muhammad Arif Shizrawi, and developed a deep connection with Kurdish traditional music. This early exposure would eventually shape the distinctive voice that people would recognize as Tahsin Taha. Baghdad would become an important chapter in Tahsin Taha's life. He moved there for education and studied at the Institute of Fine Arts, graduating in 1964. But music was already becoming part of his public life. His first recorded or broadcast performances date back to the late 1950s, and sources place his early appearances on the Kurdish section of Baghdad radio in 1958. Radio was enormously important at the time. A singer did not need social media, streaming platforms, or television to reach thousands of people. One voice coming through a radio receiver could travel into homes across Kurdistan, and Tahsin Taha's voice began to travel. Tahsin Taha was not only a singer, he was also an educator. After graduating in 1964, he worked as an art education teacher, including in the Makhmur area. Later in Erbil, he worked in music and school anthem education. He also became involved in artistic activities and helped establish the Erbil Arts Troupe with other musicians and artists. This part of his story is important. He was not simply performing Kurdish culture, he was helping teach and preserve it. His songs drew heavily from Kurdish musical traditions and the cultural atmosphere of rural Kurdish life. His voice was particularly suited to the emotional qualities of Kurdish maqam traditions. Tahsin Taha's importance was not simply the number of songs he recorded, it was the way he delivered them. His voice carried a distinctive emotional character. His repertoire included songs that became strongly associated with Kurdish musical heritage, including Bêrîvanê, Rabe Cotyar, and Felek. His performances connected traditional musical forms with the experiences and emotions of ordinary Kurdish people. Love, separation, homeland, hope, loss, and longing. These themes gave his music a life beyond the moment in which it was recorded. Tahsin Taha's life also intersected with the turbulent political history of the Kurds in Iraq. Several biographical sources describe his involvement with the Kurdish movement during the 1960s. One account says that in 1961 he left Baghdad and joined the movement led by Mustafa Barzani. Other sources describe his arrest and imprisonment during this period, although published accounts differ about some dates and circumstances. What is clear is that his artistic life did not exist separately from the historical reality surrounding Kurdish society. For him and for many Kurdish artists of his generation, music, identity, and political history often existed side by side. Many of his songs were about the Kurdish cause directly and indirectly, including the songs Amedi Peshmerga, Dengê Welat Shirin, Millete Menamire, and many other songs. The following decades brought major changes to Kurdistan and Iraq. Tahsin Taha continued his artistic career through these changing circumstances. His work remained closely connected to Kurdish culture and the emotional experiences of his people. After the collapse of the Kurdish movement in 1975, sources associate him with the songs Felek and Distar, reflecting the sorrow and uncertainty of that period. Whether heard as a love song, a lament, or an expression of a troubled era, this is one of the reasons his music continued to resonate. His songs could carry personal emotion while also reminding listeners of a much larger collective experience. So what made Tahsin Taha different? Perhaps it was his voice. Perhaps it was his ability to make traditional Kurdish melodies feel personal, or perhaps it was the combination of both. His singing had a distinctive throat technique and emotional intensity. He could sound powerful without losing vulnerability. He could sing about love and make it sound like memory. He could sing about separation and make it feel like loss. And he could sing about Kurdish life in a way that made listeners feel that the song belonged to them. In 1994, Tahsin Taha went to the Netherlands. Published sources describe this period as part of the final chapter of his life. Only about a year later, on May 28, 1995, Tahsin Taha died in the Netherlands at the age of 53. Accounts differ on some details surrounding his final illness, but his death marked the end of a relatively short life that had left a remarkably large cultural legacy.
باشي وقتي بني بتني بيلاني نشي بجي خاطرة بيت أوي جاني أي جاني أي جاني ونشي بجي خاطرة.
His body was eventually returned to Kurdistan, where he was buried in Amedi town near Duhok.
خاطر خواستنا دیماهی که گل خوشتبی اما ناوه و هزانه که وقتی که تمرین و اما تشتكي قال لك يعني طبيعية سر جيل زمنية بيني سر بدنيا هر بشرة مريتن أبيش أبي هزانة كاش همي بش همي مروفات ما كانوا وهمي قال خوش تبي كو تيتا بدنك أبي بوما لبدا داس خاطر خوش قال خو بخازم قال مني فر خوش تبي أبا أسشوم ريكا دير وك دريايك ببنا قلك طاري وقلك ياكير.
Tahsin Taha died nearly 3 decades ago, but death did not end his musical journey. His songs continued to circulate from generation to generation, his name remained connected with the golden era of Kurdish music. In 2022, Erbil held a memorial ceremony honoring Tahsin Taha alongside other pioneering Kurdish artists, recognizing their lasting contribution to Kurdish art and music. In Duhok, a big park is named after Tahsin Taha. In Amedi, his statue shows up like a welcoming message when enter Amedi area. That is perhaps the clearest measure of his legacy, not the number of recordings, not the technology used to distribute them, but the fact that a voice recorded decades ago can still reach a listener today and make them feel something. That is when an artist becomes more than an artist. He becomes part of memory. Till this moment, he inspired hundreds of Kurdish singers, and they still sing his songs. Tahsin Taha's life lasted only 53 years, but some lives are not measured by their length. They are measured by what remains after they are gone. A melody, a voice, a memory, a feeling shared between generations. From the mountains of Amedi to the radio stations of Baghdad, from the stages of Kurdistan to exile in Europe, Tahsin Taha carried a piece of Kurdish identity with him. And decades later, his voice still returns. Not because history refuses to move forward, but because some voices become part of history itself. If you enjoyed this documentary, subscribe to Curiosity Code and tell us in the comments, which Kurdish artist should we tell the story of next?